Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and a little while ago I did a video prompted by Brian Julius, some stuff that a video that Brian Julius had done on Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and I used it to I pulled in the electric car market data in India, which is a data set that Brian had passed along when we were doing the definitive guide to Power Query M book, and so I use that as kind of the basis, and I just pulled it in, right, and then asked it a simple question of like, hey, give me what are the key insight, right? Create a chart of the key insights and that sort of thing. And it gave me like four different charts, right, and it gave me these different key insights down here. But then of course, an astute viewer of the channel, right? And it generated a lot of feedback and discussion. But somebody was like, Mr. Bartis one is like, hey, are these correct? Which is a fair question to ask, right? So I'm like, okay, and anytime that my viewers, ask something of me, I'm there's a very good chance I'm going to do it. So this is the response to that. So what I did, of course, was I pulled the same data into Power BI Desktop to see if is it correct? Is it not correct? And the answer is that yes, it's correct, but sort of no, but then yes again. And let me show you what I mean. Let me get this up here. So when I pulled in the data, right, initially, so you can see, and I tried to create the same graphs. You can see here that this is the model by brand, which is this guy right here, top brands. And you can see that it's very different, right? There's a lot more brands going on here. Well, what I realized then when I did this was that if you go back to the code, and I'm using the free version of Claude, so you have to understand that. What I found is that it just sampled the data. It took the top 10 rows of data. So it began at the index of like 0. And so it really brought in rows, 0 through 9, essentially is what it did, in order to display these graphs and that sort of thing. But then, are the insights correct or incorrect based upon what it brought in? Well, it's kind of interesting in terms of, so it only brought in, the code to, brought in like, the first 10 rows, but a lot of the insights seem based upon the entire data set. And let me show you what I mean by that. So first of all, let's go here to the filters and say advanced filtering, column 1 is less than 10, right? Let's go ahead and apply that. And you can see that now we basically have the same exact thing, right? We got Tesla and Volkswagen, and then Audi, BMW, and all of these other ones right there, right? So that this graph is the same. The body styles, hatchback, sedan, SUV, liftback, and as you can see, hatchback, sedan, SUV, liftback. We've got the same data, car segments, right? F, D, C, and B. So we have the same thing. F, D, C, and B. Obviously the clustered column chart doesn't support two different y-axes, so I had to use a line chart and column chart, right? Limitations of Power BI. And then let's see the scatter chart. Like we get the same scatter chart, right? So this here is the air lucid air, which is this guy right here. Lucid, that's the air. It's the same stuff. You can see we have that data point, these two data points, that one up there, that one there, these two side by side, right? So yes, it generated accurate graphs and accurate information based upon the top 10 rows. But like what's interesting is like it says Tesla, Volkswagen, and Audi are among the top brands in the Indian EV market. So if we go back to this graph, right? Okay, Tesla, Volkswagen, and then Audi's over here. Like maybe it shows it because alphabetically, right? These are all tied, and it shows it. But if we get rid of this filter, rid of it, and we'll go back to page 1. So you have here, let's see if we can sort of get this and zoom in. So Tesla, Audi, Nissan, and Volkswagen are, so if you look at the full data set, right, Tesla, Audi, it makes much more sense that Audi is in there. And it's like it just picked a random one between Volkswagen and Nissan potentially. But what's even more telling is the SUVs and hatchbacks dominate the market in terms of body styles, which you don't really get from this, right? You have sedans are higher than SUVs. So you're like, well, where did this insight come from? Where this insight came from was the full data set. Here you can clearly see with the full data set, you have SUV and hatchback are literally dominate, right? Everything else. So that's kind of interesting. And so it could have only gotten that insight from looking at the full data set, even though it only pulled in the code, it pulled in the first 10 rows, right? And then it says segments C and D have the most models available. And this was one I think I need to, let's see, C and D, and then that's okay. I need to create another. Let's go ahead and create that right now. So segment C and D, and we'll do this, and we'll do this, have the most models available. So this one, it seems like it got wrong potentially in terms of it's like segment C and D. This has D has 15, but B has 22, right? And so this is, let's see, count of model. Maybe if I do a distinct count, B came down a little bit, 21. But this one, maybe it got kind of wrong in terms of segments have the most models available, but it doesn't provide us a graph of that because this is a graph of average range and average price. So this one's questionable, right? Higher segments, EF, typically have greater range, but significantly higher prices. So higher segments, so that would be back to here, and it'd be this bottom graph here. Let's shrink these up. And let's see here. So F definitely has higher range. E actually has higher price, right? So typically higher segments E and F typically have greater range, but it's significantly higher price. And you can see that that is true with like F and S, although the E being in there maybe is a little questionable in terms of because there are like N and D that have a higher range and lower price than E. But you can see that the trend clearly from like if you go from A and through the segments and that, I guess it depends on how you define higher segments, like if they're using alphabetical order or what they are, what they're doing there. So that one, I would agree that this one is again kind of sketchy a bit. Most affordable EVs are in the A and B segments with ranges typically below 250 kilometers. Okay, so let's see. Most affordable EVs, A and B with ranges typically below 250. Well, yeah, okay. The average of the range in B is 265, but it's 143 in the A range. Right. So, this one I'd say is pretty accurate, but again, these last three or whatever, maybe there's some, you could find some nits about it and that. But that's the update on it. I think it came out pretty well. And again, I mean, just it's interesting to me in terms of like just the default choices for that it made for these different charts that it came up with a chart that just Power BI can't do. This clustered column chart with dual y-axis. I couldn't figure out how to do that using Power BI natively. And that these like these intermediate lines, right? These hashes or whatever. I mean, I like the fact that it's a lot easier to see them. Like on the Power BI, they're there, right? But you almost can't see them. I mean, it's almost impossible to see them. They're there, but it's so faint that I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I like that as well as I can actually see them. Now having the vertical lines, I don't think that was a good choice. I think some of the choices that Claude made are better choices, are things that I've seen um, out of Nick's books, practical charts and more practical charts, and that some of he almost never has this y-axis is always just the numbers, right? It doesn't have like Power BI has this count of model, right? And they've got he and Nick like he prefers to have it like up here somewhere in terms of count of model by brand. Well, why do you need this count of model right here? You've already telling it's count of model by brand. In Claude seems to do this stuff like, hey, number of models, right? Top brands and market, and then hey, we're reporting on number of models, right? Versus having in this y-axis and that. So there's some things that I think that Claude gets right versus like the default settings in Power BI. Like it takes, and that's one of overarching complaints you hear again and again about Power BI is like you can get good looking reports, right, and dashboards out of Power BI, but it is a ton. There's a voice crack there. It is a ton of work, right? So and the fact that like all these are the same color versus hey, Claude actually created different colors for all of these. I'd have to manually go in and like code each of these into a different color if I wanted to get something like this, or potentially do some kind of conditional formatting rule or something like that. So I think there's a lot of nice things that Claude does, honestly, that I wish Power BI had defaults for, or I should actually change the defaults for Power BI so that I could get graphs that look more the way I want them to versus having to literally go in and customize, each graph every single time, which is just a huge time suck, right? So yeah, so overall, I think again, using the free version, right? I don't know if it's fair, with these three kind of ones you might be, this is the free version of Claude, people, right? I'm pretty sure that Brian is using the professional version of Claude, the pay for, the one you pay for, and it's probably infinitely better than the one that, the free version. If the free version is this good, paid version, you know, there you have it. All right. Well, technical problems aside, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.